So I'm sure you've all heard 1,000 times before, good audio on a terrible video is much better and more enjoyable for the viewer than bad audio with incredible video. And I couldn't agree with that any more than I already do. Now, I do come from a professional music background. I was in the music industry since the age of 18. I started out as a performing and touring artist in a few bands that did pretty well, had some major radio airplay. We got to open up for some of my favorite bands like Incubus and POD, System of a Down, Dashboard Confessional, bands like that were really popular back in that day. I got to live out my dream of rock stardom. Then I decided to have children. And then I wanted to come home. I wanted to be home with my family. The rock star touring life just wasn't me. I wasn't in it for the typical rock star thing that comes along with it. The this, and this. I just wanted the this. So I decided to go into the studio, and I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to go into a very high-end studio and become a high-end professional audio engineer. Then after becoming very proficient and capable of using Pro Tools and all the audio equipment necessary, I became a producer. And I was fortunate enough to be able to work with legendary artists like Patti LaBelle and a lot of big Philadelphia names. And then I was offered a spot out in LA, and I loved everything about what I did. But most of all, I love audio engineering. So that's why when I can't have the best level audio, I cringe. So even today, I wanted to make this fair, so I am recording this current video on the Sennheiser MKE200 because that is one of the microphones that we're going to be comparing today. The Sennheiser MKE200 is at the top tier. That is the highest, most expensive microphone that we will look at today. Next is the Comica VM10 Mark II. This is a tried and true mic. I have had this one since the day it was released. I had the VM1, the original VM10. That was a great microphone. I had the Rode Video Mic Goes, and they just didn't do it for me. Comica has a fuller but brighter sound than the Rode does. The Rode was a little dull for me. Lastly, we're going to use this tiny little onboard, cute little Ceramonic. And believe it or not, this little Ceramonic is a great microphone. Not necessarily for the camera we tested it with today, which is the Canon R8, but that is the best microphone that I have found for this little guy. And this is the Canon PowerShot V10. This is my current vlogging camera, even though I don't do a lot of vlogging these days. When I want to run out and get some recording, especially for our main channel, which you can find here, Healing Together, this is the camera I take out with this little Ceramonic onboard mic, and it's just like that. It's that tiny little package. Fold up the screen, raise the Ceramonic, and that little guy goes right in your pocket. And this, to me, is a brilliant camera. But comparing this to some other things like the DJI Osmo Pockets and some other vlogging style cameras will come in a later video. But in today's video, we're going to take a currently pretty popular vlogging camera, which is the Canon R8, which is a banger of a camera for so many reasons, but even for vlogging, it's phenomenal. And we're going to compare it to 3 different onboard mics as well as the Canon R8 onboard mics. Now really the sound begins before the microphone. It begins in the camera's in-body preamps. The preamps are what feed the sound to the microphone. And with trashy preamps like a lot of cheap cameras have, you're going to get trashy audio, which is why most cameras' onboard audio just sounds like muffled garbage. And if you're using a cheap garbage microphone on a cheap camera with garbage preamps, it's still going to sound like garbage. But at least with the Canon R8, first off, the onboard microphones are pretty decent. I'm quite impressed with the sound coming straight from them. So that shows me that Canon put a lot of thought and effort into designing those microphones to be specifically pretty suitable for vloggers. Now with the 3 microphones that we're comparing today, it really does come down to the fact that the Canon R8 does have good quality preamps, which is why with each microphone the sound is still clear and crisp. It's not muffled, it's not gargled, and there doesn't sound like there's a huge amount of reverb. The R8 has great preamps to begin with. So we're going to compare these 3 microphones outside where there's some ambient noise, and I'm going to label each of them so it's not like a guessing game. But you tell me in the comment section which you think sounds the best to your ear and which you would go with. Because remember, everybody's ear is different. We all like different music. We all like watching different shows. We like listening to different people's voices. So everybody's gonna have a different opinion. In my personal opinion, these Comica VM10s are the best for the money. Now, before we talk about cost and all that, let's get outside and let's do the comparison, and then you can see how they sound before we talk about how much they cost. So let's go. All right, so this is going to be a basic vlogging test of just natural surroundings, capturing some ambient noise outside. We're gonna walk the same path with each microphone option. We're using the Canon R8 and the 24-105 lens set down to 24 millimeters. I am just about a full arm's length away, and I'm gonna try to keep all the same parameters for each option. Currently, we are recording on the onboard microphones of the Canon R8. Now, I have decreased the audio levels down to the first bar, so if you go all the way to the left and then come up one bar, that is where they are set to. So these are currently the onboard mics of the Canon R8, which are actually not that bad if you just have this as your only option. These are actually pretty good quality for just onboard microphones. But my consideration with this test is kind of less about the microphones, more about the R8's preamp, because I know what I like about these different microphones and what I use them for. So that was a test of the onboard microphones currently. Now next we're going to go to this tiny little Ceramonic pocket mic that I love, this little thing. I use this mainly on my Canon PowerShot VM10, whatever that little guy is that you throw in your pocket. I'll put it up here so I don't mess you up, but we're going to put in this Ceramonic right now. We are now currently recording on the Ceramonic. I'll put the model number up somewhere, but this little Ceramonic is actually quite a good little microphone. I went through about 3 or 4 different options of comparable mics like this, just tiny little adjustable plug and play microphones for that Canon PowerShot, and this one was the best. I should have done a test of all 3 of the other ones. Yeah, I had 3 other ones and this one. I got them all off of Amazon, and the Ceramonic hands down was the winner. But not even thinking about it, I just returned each one and just continued to get another one to try until I found the Ceramonic, which in my opinion had the best quality of sound. So right now we're on the Ceramonic. So going from the Ceramonic, next we're going to use the Comica VM10 version 2. So let's go from the Ceramonic, pulling out the Ceramonic. This is now the Comica VM10 version 2. I do believe that the version 2 has a little more robust sound than the version 1, the original VM10, while still maintaining that nice brightness that I liked about the Comica. Comica, in my opinion, makes a wonderful product. They are like the Audio-Technica of the professional music industry. When everybody else was using Shure microphones, Shure SM57s and 58s, back in the day, I found Audio-Technica versions of both of those that, in my opinion, again, in my opinion, were a little bit brighter, but also just as full as the Shures. So I think that these little Comicas are great microphones. So next, we're going to go from the Comica to the most expensive option, which is the Sennheiser MKE200. Now I'm also watching the decibel levels change with each microphone, and it seems like this Sennheiser MKE200 sits in the perfect place also as I decrease the level of the camera's preamps. So we've got ambient noise. We've got cars and bikes going by. We've got the neighbor mowing their lawn, although I think she stopped now. We've got birds chirping. We've got my feet shuffling in the ground. And you want a little ambient noise to create your story, but you want your voice to come through and be what is the focus of whatever you're working on, the story you're telling or the piece. The ambient noise helps create the environment. So there's a comparison of the Sennheiser MKE200 on the onboard microphones of the Canon R8, recording on the Ceramonic. I'll put the model number up somewhere, but this is now the Comica VM10 version 2, the Sennheiser MKE 200. All right, so now that that's over, what did you think sounded the best? Which sounded best to your ear? Now, I will also tell you that right now, the MKE 200 is going directly through the preamps of my Sigma FP. So there's no other added equipment, there's no additional preamps. It's just the Sennheiser MKE 200 directly into the Sigma FP, which shows me the Sigma FP also has pretty decent preamps because this sounds quite good. Now, normally I would not be recording on either of these because typically we would record all studio work with Canon C200s, XLR mics going into the XLR input of the C200, and a higher end-ish microphone like the NTG2, NTG3. Those are two of my favorites, but I will say that I am quite particular to Audio-Technica condenser mics. There's something about them, they have a unique quality, they sound bright, but they sound full. And no matter what I run them through, they all sound great. So while I do like and appreciate the quality of the NTG series, I am somewhat partial more towards the Audio-Technica condenser mics. But if I were using one of those microphones with the Sigma FP or a similar DSLR style camera, I would be using an additional preamp such as this. And this is the Beachtech DXA Micro Pro. Now this has a single XLR input. It has a left and a right 1/8 inch input, it has a stereo, and it has an out. This also offers phantom power for microphones that are not powered within themselves. So this is actually a great little unit. You can get a very high quality, very good sound out of this little box. The downside is it takes 9-volt batteries. So who keeps 9-volt batteries around anymore? Well, this guy, because I have to. Because I like the sound of this, and I've compared it to many other preamps. In fact, that will come in a later video. We're going to compare this little onboard Beachtech to some other popular preamps. So now let's talk about price. Because at the end of the day, nowadays, price is really king. Well, this little Ceramonic cost me $19.99 on Amazon. Brand new in the package, not a deal, no special, nothing like that. So $20 for this little Ceramonic. There were cheaper options, but I would not suggest going with any of them. All the other cheaper options I found were garbage. Next, for only $10 more, for $29.99, you can get this awesome little Comica VM10 Mark II for $30 on Amazon. And half the time, if you scroll down to the used little bar there, you'll find one for $24.95. I even found one for $19.99 one time. These are great mics. You can't go wrong for it. So in that $30 range, this is absolutely my go-to. But now the MKE 200. Okay, the MKE 200 kind of varies all over the place in price. I've seen it as cheap as like $63. I've seen it as much as $100, and it's all over the place. It's the same mic. Try to find it for $63. I don't think it's worth $100. The next microphone that I am purchasing, which is the MKE 400. That will be the next mic I purchase. But I'm waiting for a sale. I'm a single father of 6 kids. I always wait for sales. And then I'll put out a video comparing the MKE 200 specifically with just the MKE 400. We'll take a listen to the difference between those. Alright friends, so I hope that today's video was helpful. Here at The Growing Pro, I'm not someone who thinks I know everything. I'm still learning and growing every day. Even though I've been shooting photography for over 20 years, paid, professional, headshot and model portfolio work, I've really only been shooting videography for about 10 years. And I got started basically through my YouTube channels. But I love camera gear, I love gear, I just love buying cameras and gear. But what that does is it gives me the opportunity to continue to compare and contrast and then find what I like, love, and hate. And that way I can bring that information here to you so that hopefully that information will help you circumvent this entire process, cut to the chase, and start making money and growing to become a pro. Alright friends, thanks for watching another video. I'll catch you in the next one.